Welcome back. We are pleased to be back and to look forward to 4 presentations still that will actually cover very different areas, because they will be ranging from the field of military interpreting all the way to cognitive approaches, business translation, and the 4th one?
Linguistics.
And which one?
Linguistics.
And linguistics applications. So we have those 4 great presentations still coming up. But I would like to make 2 announcements before we start. And I do it with great pleasure, and I would like to do it now because some of us need to leave. And our program is, of course, very much professionally oriented, even though it's research-based. So we are doing this so that the students can move forward and can find great jobs, continue their education in the PhD programs, develop themselves further on. So we know that some of the students are still on the job search, but we already have 2 great announcements and news that are very joyful, and we are very proud of our students, and I would like to share those news with you. So the first one is Jordan Van Horn was accepted to the Graduate School of Applied Linguistics at Columbia University. To say a word about this, what kind of program and what you intend to do?
So I'm going to study psycholinguistics at Columbia, and I'm very grateful to this program and to Dr. Firmanek and to all my professors for supporting me, and I'm really excited. So thank you.
And we have another announcement with great joy and with pleasure. One of our students who has a language combination that is very unusual. She came in with a language combination of Spanish and English, as most of our students. She also is a heritage speaker of Farsi, which is a Persian language. She has applied for one of the most prestigious, if not the most prestigious, scholarship within the National Security Education Program that prepares future professionals to work for the US government. It's a very competitive program, very well known, and it's a great award. She was just awarded, and it's my pleasure to introduce Nazanin Kausari. Would you say a couple of words of what you intend to do?
Just stand here. I am planning on studying Farsi for, I'm going to come over here. I'll be studying Farsi, which is my heritage language that I speak with my family, so I have a good foundation. My program entails me going to Georgetown University for 6 weeks this summer to study intensive 2nd level Persian. And then once I complete that portion, I will leave for Dushanbe, Tajikistan in August, in the middle of August, and I will be there through next May and hopefully come back with near native ability in Farsi and seeking a career as a linguist for a branch of the government. So I would really like to thank Dr. Firmanek because I didn't know about this at all. She recognized that I had a unique language combination, which I didn't appreciate until now, and really pushed me to applying for this and wrote brilliant letters of recommendation.
And other professors helped you?
Yes, and also in help with my application process. She helped me with my essays. Dr. Barber helped me. I consulted Dr. Burgos and Dr. Frankum for the linguistics and localization. Professor Alarcon also wrote me a letter of recommendation. So I'm just really thankful for everything that the program has given to me, and I'm excited for the next step in my journey.
So now it's up to you sharing your research project about cognitive knowledge and languages.
Hi everyone, my name is Jordan Van Horn, and the title of my project is Language Use and Cognitive Flexibility. So for the past several decades, the fields of applied linguistics and psychology have demonstrated the cognitive benefits of speaking more than one language. And examples of the benefits of bilingualism can be seen in an increased awareness of metalinguistic skills, greater capacity to engage in divergent thinking, and there's even evidence to support that bilingualism can be a protective mechanism against age-related decline and dementia. One of the most well-supported benefits of bilingualism can be seen in the impact it has in strengthening executive control. And executive control or executive function, describes a system which manages and controls higher order cognitive processes. And you can see on the figure to the left some examples of those cognitive processes, including planning, prioritizing, reflection, flexibility, organizing, and goal-directed behavior. Evidence from neurolinguistics have shown that for balanced bilinguals, both languages are active, even when only one is being used. And this is significant because with both systems simultaneously active, it's the role of the executive control that is engaged as the bilingual selects the appropriate linguistic form from the appropriate system over one that belongs to the competing system. And Bialystok, who is a pivotal figure in this field on research on bilingualism and executive control, claims that the constant engagement of this system in managing language may render executive functioning more robust and accessible in bilinguals. In addition to the condition of speaking more than one language, professional expertise has also been shown to produce differences between bilinguals and professionals in languages on tasks of executive control. However, my research question focused on whether or not this was also the case for consecutive interpreters who fundamentally exploit cognitive resources in a different way than simultaneous interpreters. This can be seen in Giles's processing models, where he distinguishes between simultaneous interpreters and consecutive interpreters in the way that they vary in temporal parameters, conditions of simultaneity, the unit of processing, structural expectations, and basic processes of intention and memory. Giles points out that due to these demands, there's a distinction between professionals who come to be consecutive interpreters and those who come to be simultaneous interpreters, as good simultaneous interpreters are not automatically good consecutive interpreters and vice versa. And as in the case of consecutive interpreters, the delay that precedes the production phase may employ fewer attentional demands when compared to those involved in simultaneously comprehending and producing a speech segment. So as an extension of the primary literature on a task measuring aspects of executive control, performance between consecutive interpreters and bilinguals should be equal, but greater than that of monolinguals, with all other conditions being equal. The measure of executive control that I selected on my task was the Wisconsin card sorting task, and this was used to analyze the cognitive performance of participants who come from different language backgrounds. And the Wisconsin card sorting task is a commonly used neuropsychological task that measures cognitive flexibility, which is one of the many processes of executive function. Participants on this task must select and match a card according to one of the stimulus cards according to a reference card according to one of three rules according to color, number, and form. For example, a participant according to this screenshot would match according to color, according to number, and according to form, and would receive instant feedback on whether or not that response is correct or incorrect. And after 4 successfully matched trials, the participant would receive a message of whether or not the response was correct or incorrect based on the rule. However, the rule changes, and for the participant, they may experience this rule to be rather unexpected. When the rule changes, it is important that the type of error the participant makes would be an index of cognitive flexibility. So specific types of errors on the Wisconsin card sorting task measure a participant's ability to be cognitively flexible. So for example, the rule here is for the participant to match shape. The participant matches shape and consequently gets the response correct. In the next trial, the rule unexpectedly changes to a rule of matching color, and the participant unknowingly continues to match to shape, receives a feedback of an incorrect response, And this error is called a non-preservative error. It's a normal error, and it's a fundamental aspect of the task. However, the error that I was most interested in is when a participant continues in spite of negative feedback to match to a mental set that they deem correct. So that they continue to receive negative or disconfirming feedback, and they make a preservative error. So preservative errors in this case are the types of errors that that constitute a level of cognitive inflexibility. So for my study, a total of 30 participants completed a language background questionnaire and engaged in an online version of the Wisconsin card sorting task. Participants were sorted into groups based on their responses to the language background questionnaire, which included questions of what they deemed to be their native language, how long they spent living abroad, their subjective responses to how well they deemed their language ability in terms of comprehension, production, both receptive and productive language skills in Spanish and English, and performance on the Wisconsin card sorting task between my 3 groups of participants, monolinguals, bilinguals, and consecutive interpreters, were analyzed by calculating mean reaction time after the rule change, the number of attempts, proportion of correct responses, proportion of preservative errors, and the proportion of non-preservative errors. And I submitted this information to a series of regression measures in order to calculate how different groups of participants performed on this measure. So I obtained significant results for all of my measures except for mean response time following the rule change. However, interestingly enough, after subjecting scores to the regression analysis, I found that all of these measures were not sufficient enough to account for the total variance that I observed in all of the scores related to my participants. However, it is noteworthy to analyze certain trends that I saw and found to be very interesting in the study. For example, I saw that for bilinguals, bilinguals had a lower number of attempts, a higher proportion of correct responses. However, they displayed a higher number of preservative errors, indicating that they were in some ways cognitively inflexible on this task, which was rather surprising. So the results suggest that bilinguals may have been more efficient and accurate at guessing the rule, just despite repeating mental sets after just confirming feedback. As for performance by consecutive interpreters, after analyzing my participant groups based on categorization from the language background questionnaire, only 2 participants were able to meet the criteria for the consecutive interpreter category. And although no claims can be made about this group, qualitatively, consecutive interpreters responded similarly with bilinguals in that they had more attempts more attempts in the task, a greater proportion of correct responses, and a higher proportion of preservative errors. So the results of my study were interesting in that they revealed several interesting trends that could be used in the development of other studies in this field, other extensions of the study, I mean. And the results could be due to a number of factors, including the small sample size of the participants that I was able to sample for the study, the application of the task through a remote medium, large variation within participant groups, and the use of an abbreviated rather than the full version of the Wisconsin card sorting task. And future explorations of this study could focus on distinguishing between different types of preservative errors, those that reflect a clear continuation of the mental set despite disconfirming feedback, and those that may be coded as preservative errors when in fact a participant demonstrates an understanding of the rule but unsuccessfully is able to infer that rule. So to conclude, future research is needed in order to determine whether or not the trends I observed in my study are unique to the study or indicate a larger finding, as a larger finding would be very meaningful to studies in bilingualism and executive control, as well as the field of interpreting and translation studies.
I don't have really a question, just a comment. I think it's a really fascinating study. I really like how it's set up. And it seems to me that you could really approach this as a sort of pilot and try to replicate that, taking into account the limitations that you pointed out. Having larger groups, obviously, having, especially for your interpreters category, having a higher number of participants, and maybe maybe extending the set of the Wisconsin set that you were talking about. But it seems to me to be a very solid study and research, and really having the potential to provide some insight on your research topic, the cognitive flexibility or inflexibility. So I really like it.
I agree with what Stephanie said. I think it's a really great study and one that has potential. So we should keep going with it. I have two questions. The first question regards the unsuccessful confirmation. So if the participant was aware that there was a rule change, but they made the inaccurate selection, right? How was that coded, and how are those errors dealt with in this?
So that was one of the limitations of the study, that within preservative errors, any incorrect response was coded as a preservative error. So if a participant was not necessarily continuing a mental set, but maybe by chance got the incorrect rule.
Because they've got a 50-50 chance.
Exactly.
Right?
That was not coded. So I think that a future study which broke down those errors by a same category error or a different category error would be something that would be really
And does
telling.
the software that you use give you that information, or would you have to transfer this into a different platform? Because you might already have the data to make that.
Right. So we have the data, but it was very difficult to code, and for the nature of this research project, it was more important just to kind of get the gist, to generally see what kinds of the number of preservative errors without distinguishing.
And then so my other comment, maybe just something to think about, is I wonder, you said that the bilinguals had a higher rate of preservative errors, or a higher number of preservative errors, and I wonder if this also might have something to do with working memory, because bilinguals have also been shown to have higher working memory function. So you might get kind of a crossover of two variables here, where a bilingual is remembering, man, I just did this rule correctly, maybe the system's wrong, or maybe something's going on, and they continue because they've got in their working memory that a previous rule that they're applying was successful. And so I wonder if there's kind of a crossing of what we assume are benefits of bilingualism resulting in a higher number of preservative errors. Just something to think about.
That's really interesting that you mentioned that, because some studies that have employed the use of the Wisconsin card sorting task among different participant groups have controlled for sort of that finding in the literature by assessing the working memory of the participant groups, doing some type of digit span task or reading span task to control for variance in terms of working memory among participants.
Okay, good.
What was their negative feedback to discourage them from? So
the negative feedback, when a participant's response was not following the rule, they would get a, I think the indication was correct or not, or incorrect.
I'm sorry, did you mention how early the second language was acquired? Was that something that you controlled for?
That was something that I had in my language background questionnaire, but when I was analyzing my results to my participant groups, I wasn't able to include that in the formation of my groups.
I wrote a paper on how early languages had to be acquired in order to have an effect on executive function when I was an undergrad, so I was just wondering.
All right, thank you very much.